To you, this is Fox 6 News.
A police department on the defensive.
Mrs. Houghton was insisting there was no weapons in the house. There were no guns in the house. There was nothing there that would be, and she wasn't fearful for herself, wasn't fearful of any type of other things.
Brown Deer police explained their side in a previous standoff with Sunday's gunman.
To try to say that just because of one incident, this is what, this caused this whole thing to take place, I don't believe that's the facts.
Tonight, we know where Radcliffe Houghton got the gun used and the 911 call from Zena Houghton that baffled cops.
911, what's the location of your emergency?
I know, I'm on a pay phone and I have to turn my phone off, my cell phone. It's an emergency.
Our big story tonight, a chief's rebuttal. The Brown Deer Police Department receiving heavy criticism lately for the way it handled the standoff last year with Radcliffe Houghton.
Now, the head of that department says his officer did everything they should have when dealing with the shooter a number of times in the last few years. Fox 6's Henry Rossoff live at the Brown Deer Police Department now with details. Good evening, Henry.
Good evening, and the main incident we're talking about is a standoff just about 2 years ago where Houghton was not arrested.
To try to say that just because of one incident, this is what, this caused this whole thing to take place, I don't believe that's the facts.
Brown Deer Police Chief Stephen Rinzel defends the actions of his police department and their various encounters they had with Brookfield salon shooter Radcliffe Houghton and his wife, the main target of the attacks, Zena Houghton.
It does come down to a judgment call out there, and sometimes you have to allow their judgment to work through out there.
Rinzel specifically talks about a situation in January of 2011 when they were called to the Houghton home because Zena claimed she wanted to leave after an argument they had and Radcliffe would not move his car. An officer thought she saw Radcliffe holding something that looked like a weapon. 2 other officers saw him, but do not believe they saw a weapon. Still, the team backed off and brought in a supervisor to sort everything out.
Mrs. Houghton was insisting there was no weapons in the house. There were no guns in the house. There was nothing there that would be, and she wasn't fearful for herself.
Rinzel says Zena told officers she didn't want them in her home, and the supervisor eventually made a judgment call to back off and made no arrests but filed disorderly conduct charges because Radcliffe had thrown clothes onto the lawn during the incident.
Somebody might have questioned us if we would have went in there and knocked that door down for a disorderly conduct case.
Rinzel says he understands it's tough for abuse victims to cooperate with police sometimes. He says the second police did notice something more serious when they saw Zena battered and bruised October 2nd. They pushed her to come into the office against her will for these pictures and brought in Radcliffe. Rinzel thinks back to the comments Zena made during the domestic abuse restraining order hearing last week.
If she ever would have told us anything that she stated in that tape, that would have been very helpful for us. But she was never very cooperative.
And unfortunately, the Brown Deer Police acknowledge it is very difficult for victims to cooperate with police at times with their home life considerations and all the issues we've been talking about these past few days. They say, unfortunately, Zena was one of those who was uncooperative. Live in Brown Deer, Henry Rossoff, Fox 6 News.
Henry, do we know if this is a case that she didn't know if there were weapons there, or perhaps they are alluding to the fact she was denying that there were weapons?
Police say she stated emphatically that there were no weapons in there. Now, whether she was covering or not is another story. But her side of the story, there was no minced words. There are no weapons inside.
All right, Henry Rossoff, thank you.
Meanwhile, funeral arrangements have been announced for 2 victims from Sunday's shootings. The funeral for